The level of scumbaggery you have to possess to be able to, like, I'm championing women's sports, and then I'm also going to throw every woman who works for me under the fucking bus. It's like, it's textbook gaslighting, and then he says that he's the one being gaslit is just, I mean, chef's kiss.
Were you guys recording for your session?
Hello and welcome to Expected Own Goals. I am your host, Eric Morgan, a former soccer writer for Howler and Deadspin.
And I'm Evan Davis.
I'm Arianna Cascone.
Yep, the intro has changed.
All right, week 2. Evan, you want to do a little whip around the world before we get, and then maybe the league before we get to our game of the day?
This was a packed weekend. Derbies all over the continent between the Manchester Derby, Wolfsburg and Bayern finally settling the title race in the Frauen Bundesliga. Tigres and Chivas playing a big game down in Liga MX Femenil. Something happened at Goodison Park. We don't have to talk about it. Then
it was fine.
And then El Clásico, which went as you expected. Man, it drives me nuts that neither Real Madrid nor Barcelona put the regular season Clásicos in the Bernabéu or the Luis Companys. That really grinds my gears.
I really understand from a Real perspective why they don't, because they don't need to see consistent bloodbaths at the Bernabeu.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, especially, I mean, the Alfredo Di Stefano sold out. Like, it's not a big stadium. It's only, I think, like 7,000 people. But every time Barca come to town, it packs out. So even when Real is shit, will show up. Anyway, that's just my little bugbear. I mean, but great attendances otherwise. I mean, 14,000 for Tigres Chivas at the Estadio Universitario. I think Wolfsburg set a new record for the Volkswagen Arena, almost 25,000. 40,000 came out to the Etihad. Wolfsburg probably feels a little bit hard done by for not getting a result. They did not deserve to lose 4-0. There was probably a decision that could have gone Manchester United's way that may have changed the momentum of that game, but it's also Manchester United, so they deserve what they get.
Let's move on to the NWSL, where we had a weekend that I think provided us a lot of insight about the parity in the league, and by that I mean the parity in the league is here to stay.
Mm-hmm. At least in the early going.
The refs didn't want Portland to win against Gotham.
You said it, not me.
Calling back 2 goals, right? Like, they lose to Gotham 1-0. Rough. At home opener. First time they ever lost their home opener.
I think they were both the right calls.
The offside on the first one, I don't know.
I think that's a camera angle thing. I think that camera angle makes it look like Davidson's arm is out in front of Smith, but I think if we actually had a straight parallel shot, I think Smith's a half step ahead of her.
Never have I craved the British line drawing quite like I did in that moment.
So true.
But I certainly, those were funny because I felt like the first goal was clearly offside, and then when we saw the replay, it was not. And the second goal was clearly onside, and when we saw the replay, terrible angle on it, it was clearly off. But you just can't take away a goal like Sophia Smith scored, kind of on either of them, but definitely on the second, just because it's too beautiful to destroy.
We need to implement
Andres X vibes.
If the vibes hit a certain level, it overrules VAR automatically.
I'm down for that. That sounds good.
I'll take Utah, North Carolina, because I've really enjoyed the irony.
The funniest game of the weekend.
I really enjoyed that Utah put up 2 XG and scored, no goals on their opening weekend and lost. Yeah. And put up 0.1 XG, scored 2 goals.
On 2 shots. They had 2 shots all day.
And then conceded 2 penalties in what has to be one of the most chaotic sequences I've seen, neither of which North Carolina managed to score.
Somebody figured out that between the commitment of the first foul to Mandy Haught's save on the second penalty, 3 minutes and 5 seconds transpired.
Oh, wow.
2 fouls, 2 pens, 2 misses in 3 minutes and 5 seconds.
Even if she only had 1 shot, Allie Sentner continues to look like the real deal.
Honestly, I'm not mad that Utah won because that goal was worthy of being a game winner.
Totally.
It was the sound that came out of my mouth when I saw that shot was just like I could not believe my eyes out of a rookie.
Yeah, it's a worldie. I mean, can she do it again? I think is the question.
She did a lot in college, so I think so.
From that kind of distance, that level of finishing from that distance?
Why not?
Sophia Smith does it.
Yeah, exactly.
So Allie Sentner's a unicorn?
Could be.
Oh my God. We're never going to live this down. I am never going to live this down. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Kansas City, 2-0 to start the season. Do they deserve to be?
I think the Wave probably could have gotten a result from that game. I think they probably did enough.
Yeah, Temwa Chawinga is just going to cause problems this year, it appears. Her raw pace, I'm beginning to believe in.
They really need her if they are going to score any kind of goals in bunches, because everybody's hurt. So if Chawinga can hit, then a combination of her and Bia might actually get them through.
Anybody want to take Chicago-Seattle?
The first place Chicago Red Stars, is that who you're talking about?
Yes, I believe that's right.
Yeah, I did not expect them to be beating Seattle 2-1. Seattle's one goal was nice, though. Saw that replay.
I think Seattle probably can feel a touch hard done by, but whatever. Chicago has a game plan. We knew what Lauren Ball was going to look like, and it is sort of coming to pass. You can eke out results that way to, at minimum, a playoff finish. And it's 2 games into the year, so let's not get ahead of ourselves, but it could be done.
We nearly got a Staub to Swanson opener in that game in the 6th minute. And that kind of direct play, I think, will serve Chicago, particularly against teams as staunch in defense as Seattle. Seattle also, to Susie Rance's point, really does have a problem about figuring out where goals are going to come from, worldy aside, when they go down.
Right, because they can't open up. They don't have enough attackers to actually open up when they're down a goal, yeah.
That's a real game statey game in my mind. I know you watched Orlando Angel City.
I watched the first half of that, but then I turned to North Carolina. So Orlando, that was Marta scored a really nice goal, right? A volley off a corner.
Another goal where you're like, that's finishing luck, except that it's fucking Marta.
Yeah, it's Marta. Of course you can do that.
Yeah, there are 5 players in the league who can finish that regularly, and she's one of them.
5 might even be an overstatement.
Yeah, I was being real generous there. I think Angel City, who sits on 1 point after 2 games, can feel kind of hard done by that in general.
Yeah.
I think that they've been better than I expected, all things considered.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think starting Messiah Bright was the right choice. I think that needs to be Becky Tweed's game plan going forward. Other than that, I mean, it was just a very grindy kind of game.
Not the game that the XG suggests should have ended 0-0, but Louisville-Houston. Houston is a mess.
Jane Campbell saved Houston from a lot of goals.
Jane Campbell literally took one right to the face for her team. Saved that game.
Doc, you and I were talking, I think as the game was happening, the Louisville midfield was not actually connecting anything. They did not look fluid at all, but it didn't matter because as long as they just got it to those forwards were actually making things happen. And Houston's back line is an utter mess.
I don't know what's going to make it better because they looked pretty, they got cut up by North Carolina in week 1, and then they somehow eke out a point here, even though they were poor.
Maybe you just hold out hope that it's a bedding in process because the way that Fran Alonso wants them to play, they probably have the biggest tactical leap to make of any team that is going through a stylistic shift this year, which is funny because they were the team that probably played a back 3 the most last year, but it was just a very different kind of back 3. This one is a much more front foot, aggressive, attacking formation, and they just are not linking up yet, and they're leaving so much space in behind that Louisville was just able to continually pop balls over the top or pump in crosses and find space for some pretty good chances. That's the one sliver of hope that they have, that by week 4, week 5, everyone will have now gelled and then it'll start clicking, which happens. I mean, there are plenty of teams have been able to make that work and make a playoff run. So you don't write them off completely, but it's looking bad. And, the more points you drop, the more difficult it's going to become to get into the playoffs. I mean, again, Orlando, they get 1 more point from that first 4 games of last season where they looked terrible. They get 1 more point from those 4 games, they were going to be in the playoffs.
At this point, it really does feel like unless this back 3 connects together, either Fran Alonso's tenure in Houston is going to be very short. I mean, very short.
And they've got injuries that they're dealing with. Both Natalie Jacobs and Katie Lind are hurt. Sophie Schmidt was always probably going to end up in the back line at some point this season, but she's there much more quickly now. And Sarah Puntigam, they just have not gotten a lot of minutes in the NWSL yet. You do give them a little bit of grace. Same with Orlando. Orlando is going to have me playing center back at some point, the way that their injury issues are going.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, and you should be terrified. That's just something that everybody does need to keep in mind, that there are some teams that are really piling up some pretty critical injuries and don't have the depth to cover it.
Speaking of a team that might not have a lot of depth, let's talk about Bay and Washington.
How about that transition? I loved that.
Not a lot of depth is a thing that we, I think, really saw exposed over the weekend for Bay. It really feels like a game of, say, 23 minutes and then a remaining 67 minutes, if you will, because Bay came out of the blocks really strong.
Well, beyond that first minute chance that Oulimata Sarr almost scores from a yard out.
Fine, you're right. From minute 2 to minute 23, I feel like we saw what Bay was attempting to do. And it's pretty good.
The platonic ideal of how Albertine Montoya wants the team to play is the Dorian Bailey goal. The sequencing that starts with Prul and just moves so seamlessly. I mean, like, it's what, 9 passes before Bailey shoots?
I'm not even sure it's 9.
Yeah.
It's pretty quick. It's all of the touches are perfect.
Yeah.
Essentially. Oshuala finds herself essentially free at the end line after a really beautiful 1-2 with Castellanos. And Tess Bodie drags her defender away from the space that Dorian Bailey fills. Mm-hmm. And Oshuala doesn't actually look up. She just plays the ball to the 12, really knowing that that's the appropriate place for the trailing runner to be. And Bailey is there to score against her old team in what must have been a really devastating moment for Spirit fans.
That is exactly how Bay wanted to play, but it got so predictable. Like 90% of their game plan was Emily Menges hoofing the ball up the field, and I just don't know that the build actually worked. Like in that one instance, yes, it worked really well. They score a goal, it's gorgeous, but it was less effective as the game went on, and I think it's because Washington was able to kind of figure it out and mitigate what their strategy would be.
Yeah, I think let's also talk about that side of the field from Washington's perspective. Like, as good as Bay looked, I think Washington got their tactics wrong, especially in the early going. Casey Kruger is sitting very, very high, and that opens up space in behind that for some reason Adrian Gonzalez decided to have Ashley Hatch fill, which is bizarre. Ashley Hatch at times looked like a left back, especially in the early going. If there's one player who should not be that deep and in a wide channel, it's Ashley Hatch. I don't know what the thinking was there. I mean, can anybody break that out? Because if Kruger's leaving Eneg Butel on an island and Hatch is the one who is like trying to track back and fill space, it's going to make Bay FC's job easier. The way that Castellanos and Oshuala just sliced through that side of the field for that goal is a real testament to that. So somebody play devil's advocate and try and unpack the Ashley Hatch of it all from Gonzalez's perspective.
Do you want to take this one, Doc, or you want me to take this one? Because I squint and I still don't see a good reason, but I guess I could argue.
I'm in the same boat. I'm like, Eric, it's your turn.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, so my read on this, and I don't agree with it, was essentially that Oulimata Sarr was assigned higher pressing because it is more in her locker, and that almost as a knock-on de facto thing drags Hatch further and further, deeper and deeper into space onto that side, trying to find areas to pick up the ball, not so much necessarily to defend, but to come deep to pick up the ball, and does very little of that. And there's no interplay with Casey Kruger, but I think the idea was essentially, for Hatch to be an outlet that was a little bit lower and to let Sarr just run herself into the ground, pressing the back line. But even then, I struggle with that because I really don't understand what about what Sarr was assigned Hatch couldn't do.
The Spirit were not exactly a pressy team last year, far from it. But even if you thought that Sarr would be better trying to defend that high up the pitch and also be the runner into the box, why wouldn't you have Hatch and her link-up skills be more central and push Hirschfeld out to the wing when Kruger gets into the channel? Like, what's the function of Hirschfeld staying so central and pushing Hatch out wide? Shouldn't it be the other way around?
No, I'm with you 100%. I just think that all of this is a knock-on from believing that Sarr will take a slow back line and a slow old back line of Menges and Beattie and run it into the ground, and that Hatch can fill space underneath. And instead, it just ends up with Hatch really out of position, cramming the field. You said it. They got their tactics wrong. As best as I can tell, the theory of the case. Mm-hmm. And I'm very grateful that they abandoned it.
Yeah, I mean, Hatch is way more effective in the center, first of all. She touched the ball 39 times in 90 minutes, and Sarr touched the ball 36 times in 60 minutes. As you both were talking, I'm like, wait a second, how many times did Hatch touch the ball? Because when I watched the game, I didn't really clock that Hatch was doing much of anything, and it's because she's more effective as a 9, like a true 9. Getting a ball on a silver platter and finishing it, that is Ashley Hatch on the Spirit. And she can't do that when she's playing basically like left wing.
Yeah, and what's crazy is that should be painfully obvious to anybody, but especially the interim head coach of the Spirit.
We can talk about this all we like, but the Spirit also, in spite of essentially an own goal tactically that puts their team in a really bad place, do figure it out very quickly. I mean, for me, the sort of pivot points in this game occur after the first goal, the first being Oshuala taking the ball off McKeon and not scoring her chip shot from 30 yards, which I watched back a bunch of times. And this is a theme that sort of happened throughout the game. There were, on both sides, there were a number of opportunities that I feel like instead of taking an extra touch into the box, getting a higher XG chance, players opted for 20-plus yard shots that were low XG and not particularly well struck. Oshuala's is the best of them. And with Oshuala, like, you're a world-class attacker. I'm willing to give you a lot of leeway on your decision-making there. But, you know, Dorian Bailey fires from 23 when she has Camberos across the 18 in the 18th minute. And that just felt like, what are you doing here? Rodman took, in the 33rd minute, a 21-yard shot after being played in really beautifully. Definitely had an extra step for herself. And Sarr, I believe, from Rodman, took a 22-yard shot in the 35th minute. All of which I felt like, why are we shooting so soon? What is this? Like, what's the thought here? But one, you know, and maybe it's just things that happen in a game, but I was surprised that both sides really didn't force the issue or try to dribble further. And the one time it did happen, Oshuala opted not to take a shot on the edge of the 6-yard box and passed it right into the middle to 7 defenders and also Dana Castellanos in the 50th minute, which was really kind of the last opportunity that Bay had offensively until Bailey in the 87th. But what did work was Croix Bethune's pressing and then all of the other pressing that came in support of it. Maybe we want to go to the opening goal for Washington and talk about that.
It's another worldie, right? Hal Hirschfeld just strikes the ball as sweetly as you can possibly strike it. Now, she got free. There were clear defensive lapses on Bay's part that helped create space for Hirschfeld to receive and set up maybe a better angle from that far out than she would have under better pressure. But it is still a pretty ridiculous finish.
Really good work by Rodman to kind of like thread the needle between, I think it was Savvy King and Dorian Bailey, maybe? There was a little pocket of space, and Rodman just plays a ball that's really well weighted. I thought that King kind of struggled on that play. I mean, I know the goal was a snipe, but at the same time, King gets beat because of Rodman's first touch. And then also Jen Beattie doesn't really slide as fast as, like, I don't think it clocked to her that Savvy King got beat, and she's like, oh shoot, I need to slide now. And by the time it like registered for her, I think the goal was in the back of the net.
I'd go even earlier in the sequence, because the sequence begins with a pretty sloppy clear by King that gives the ball away at the half line and then is quickly played into Sarr, who plays Rodman out to the wing where King is already out of position and is then essentially deked out of her boots by Trinity Rodman's little looping touch, which had also sucked her out of the more traditional space she should have been in as a left back, creating the pocket for Hirschfeld to go into, and then creating, and Beattie should have read it, you're right, faster, but it was still all of these sort of things. And again, Savvy King, number 2 pick, rookie, elite talent, these things happen, but it was a really bad 15 seconds for her.
I think it was a pretty bad 90 minutes for her. I think she really, really struggled. And listen, the best left back in the world is going to struggle against Trinity Rodman for 90 minutes. So we'll give her a little bit of grace in that regard. But Rodman had her number all day. She ran King ragged. King did not read her runs. King ended up facing her own goal a lot of the day. Like, did not get her foot on the ball very much. And then, you know, we'll get to it, but she is directly responsible for Bethune's goal at the end of the game.
Yeah, I mean, she's one of the people, but yes,
sure.
I think that's fair.
Washington used their right side pretty much the whole game. I mean, we were kind of looking at the attacking sequences, and it's like the left side of the field was just like a black hole.
And that's probably to do more with Casey Kruger getting injured and having to bring Anna Helferty on. You make a good point that even before that, they were not going down the left a lot in the first half of the game. And why wouldn't you? Like, you know that there is going to be a rookie with a marking assignment of one of the best wingers in the world. So why not just hammer that rookie all day long?
You sort of wonder where that strategy was in those first 20 minutes, but once it was keyed on, once that goal comes, it was essentially the game plan from there on out. I thought, actually, Hirschfeld did not, despite what a goal, probably not something I knew Hirschfeld had in her locker. I thought Hirschfeld did not have a particularly strong game and was kind of the problem, or was one of the problems with Washington's central three midfielders.
That's a big reason why they actually weren't really able to build through the middle a lot, because she took a lot of touches, but was not connecting a lot of passes. The center backs kept looking for her to be the outlet ball through the middle. And it really, really wasn't working. And she completed 9 progressive actions between passes, carries, and receptions. But sadly, FBref doesn't give us the percentage of how many progressive attempts you made. So I think she made a lot. Like, I think the trust in her could work out. It could just be a matter of a rookie getting her sea legs. But if you are going to use her as the main pivot to progress the ball in the central channel, I would be a little cautious about that if I were Adrian Gonzalez. For whatever reason, he just doesn't rate Paige Matire these first couple of weeks.
Even if Hirschfeld was clogging things up and not particularly effective, the sum total of Washington's approach to denying in the mid-block, denying progressive attack was really effective. And I think keyed off by Andy Sullivan and Croix Bethune, who used their movement really well. I thought Sullivan had a really nice game. Lucky to not be red carded for handling the ball on the first goal. But from there on out, I thought was really strong.
16 on-ball defensive actions, which is what exactly what you want from a number 6. We can talk about strategy, we can talk about tactics all day, but this is the Croix Bethune game at the end of the day. This is the moment where if she ends up having the kind of career that some prospect analysts think that she's going to have, this is the moment where she announced herself. Because it wasn't just the goal. She was a menace as both a string puller in high positions and then also being that extra runner to try and create chances in the box. She had a pretty immaculate game for a number 10/inside forward.
I felt like something happened. It was like the 2-hour mark in her career hit. And she was like, oh, I can play in this league.
Yeah.
Because she was pretty absent for the first 20 or so minutes. Suddenly it was like Croix Bethune was like, oh, you know what? I absolutely can hang. And from there on out, she had 4 or 5 shots. She cranks one off the bar in the 65th minute. Probably should have scored again. Probably should have scored earlier in stoppage time before she scores.
And probably should have scored later in stoppage time as well after the goal.
Yeah, also true.
Yeah, when you were saying before, Eric, the this idea that some of the players were just kind of like taking low XG chances really far out, Croix Bethune was someone that also came to mind for me because like that 65th minute shot is like from 30 yards out, 0.03 XG, right? Like I think once she realizes, oh, those are low probability chances, like I am better off taking more touches, getting closer to the face of goal and hitting it, I think she's going to be like...
What a monstrous game. I mean, about that 65th minute chance, I do credit her for seeing the amount of space she had to take that shot. Not all chances created equal. I understood it, and she gets the most out of it. It spoke to the fact that she could be a multi-level threat and can be a threat on her dribble, and also if you give her space and time, will force you to address that as well. So while it's one of those low XG chances that she, I do think, mentally corrected in the game and didn't take again, it's one that I think sits in the head of a defender as like, I guess I actually do need to close down Croix Bethune from 30 yards on. And then suddenly Bethune can use her pace from there.
I was going to say, is she left-footed? Because I'm looking at the breakdown of her shots.
The goal's right-footed.
Yeah, the goal's right-footed, but her other shots are left-footed.
Oh, that's a really good question. She seems very two-footed to me.
Which is important given the place on the field that she plays, and that will work incredibly to her advantage. Yeah.
Ali Setner is right-footed, and she scored that worldie with her left foot. Just saying. Back to that. Go Heels.
Fucking Tar Heel stand.
So, yeah.
I mean, well, look, we just bagged on Savvy King, so
shoot.
You know,
Okay.
a tale of two heels.
But I mean, listen, going through all of the G plus components for the game, Croix Bethune had the most XG of any player on the day. She had the second most expected assists of any player on the day. She was the best dribbler. She was the best passer. She made the best receptions. She posted a .14 interrupting score as a number 10. She made 16 on-ball defensive actions, and she spent most of the day in the final third.
I think we all think that Menges had a nice game. But I think for all of the sort of compliments one can offer Menges, there was nothing through the middle for Bay in the second half. And I think we saw particularly, I mean, the Loera question hangs over this game.
Oh, yeah. God.
What is going on?
I still have not been able to get an answer, and I don't think any other reporter's been able to get an answer either. This could be a bigger story. We don't know yet, but in case anybody needs catching up, Alex Loera was not on the roster, the game day roster when it was announced. She was not on the injury report. And then JP Dellacamera all of a sudden announces near the beginning of the broadcast a Bay FC statement saying that there was an internal team matter that kept her off the roster. But she did travel. She was in Washington. She walked through the mix zone. She didn't talk to reporters, but she walked past the mix zone and reporters saw her there. It's weird. And then somebody asked Albertine Montoya after the game, and he just said, this is a small matter, and that's all we're going to say. It is really ominous. If it's not a big deal, you are making it a big deal by how weird you guys are acting.
Yeah, and she was their captain in their opener. So it's curious for sure. But I mean, whether or not Loera was there, I think Bay's midfield struggled last week too. But in this game in particular, Kieran pointed this out, that every time Bay midfielders received the ball, they could never face up. They never were able to get in a position to progress the ball forward. I don't know what they're going to do to fix that.
Joelle Anderson sitting at the base of midfield to act like a deep-lying playmaker is not what you want. That is not a player with a heavy amount of passing vision.
I think without Loera, and if this is a lingering problem, with Loera, I think they probably still are better, but I want to give Washington's press the sort of second order. It is not always a high press. It is that sort of mid-block press that really kills this game for Bay. Mm-hmm. That Bethune is instrumental in. I didn't realize she had 16 on-ball defensive actions. That is stunning. I knew her press was good. I didn't realize it was that good.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at the passing network right now. Dana Castellanos had a very, very quiet day.
She is someone that I saw get stripped of the ball almost every time she was played.
Right, yeah. It's not even your players aren't coming to receive your passes. It's that you're getting your pocket picked. And that's not what we expected she was going to do when she started playing here. Man, if Castellanos ain't working, that is a big, big issue. The team does have to turn into 4-4-2, kick it long to the forwards. And Montoya is not going to want to accept that.
Yeah, this also felt like a game where Bay's attempt at playing a possession style strikes me as if there is folly in that. I remember in our preview, Kieran had talked a fair amount about wanting to see them play 4-4-2 suffer ball. And I sort of laughed at that initially, but with no Loera, I actually do think Kundinanji, Oshwala, Bodhi, suffer ball is maybe the right approach for them. Because despite Dorian Bailey having scoring and having a pretty dangerous chance in the 87th minute, I felt as a proper midfielder, she actually didn't provide a ton.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
In attack, yes. In the midfield, to win the midfield, no, not at all. I mean, Bay had 2 shots in the second half. This is not a thing we want to see from a team. And again, Bay has had a really tough opening. I would not want to go on the road to Angel City and then on the road to Washington. So I don't want to be a Bay alarmist about this. This is just a 3,000 miles of travel a week apart for a brand new team that hasn't played together and that is missing Alex Loera under mysterious circumstances, missing Kundinanji under less mysterious circumstances. And if they can just hold on, are walking out of their first 2 games with 4 points and can feel pretty good about walking out of their first 2 games with 3 points. But I think that what Washington exposed is actually repeatable by opponents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It could create real problems going forward.
This is interesting. So they won the possession battle. Obviously, that doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme, but they did have 55% possession on the day. And Albertine Montoya, in the post-match presser, said that he thought the team played much better than they had against Angel City. How do we feel about that? It feels like a push to me. I don't think it was an improvement. I don't think it was a step back, despite the result. It just feels like it's still a work in progress. No better, no worse than the way that they played against Angel City, other than maybe the 2 Bailey chances.
Yeah, they were not great against Angel City. They just were able to maintain a lead. This is a team that has put up sub 1.5 XG through 2 games.
Yes.
This is a team that I think I was pretty high. I think we were all pretty high on going into the season, and I don't think there's any reason to, beyond this midfield, I think there's a lot that works. It's just a question of how committed to the philosophical approach that they've stated they will be. Because I don't think they're particularly well suited to it. But I buy the idea that they were slightly better here than they were against Angel City. I mean, Angel City just didn't finish.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much XG did they concede across those 2 games?
It's approaching 4, yeah.
I'm trying to figure out, like, which parts of Bay's game Albertine Montoya is saying got better from game to game. Because for me, it's not really the midfield. It's not really the defending. I thought the backline kind of struggled against Washington.
Yeah, starting Jen Beattie, I think, is a mistake.
Yeah, what is up with that?
I don't know. I mean, just on age difference alone, like Kayla Sharples, maybe if their reaction time is slow on the chance it ends up creating the Hirschfeld goal, there is a chance that a player like Sharples could like recover in time, whereas Beattie just can't.
You had asked in our internal Slack about the likelihood of Bay going to a back 3.
Ah, yes.
What were you thinking there, Doc?
I was thinking that Savvy King looked really good in the back 3 at UNC. And did Chicago ever play a back 3 when Sharples was there? I want to say yes. Okay, they did.
Not very often, but they tried it, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of thinking, like, they have players who have experience doing that in some way. Maybe it's worth kind of checking it out. I know in the NWSL, 3-backs really don't work that well. Like, teams will try it and abandon it pretty quickly.
Or they'll be Houston.
They'll be Houston. Yeah. I don't know who the third player would be.
I think the concern is that what we're talking about is creating a back 3 that really turns into a back 5 out of possession. And Montoya doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who wants to use his wing backs, if he were to build a system like that, all that defensively. So I don't know, like, to what extent you get an extra benefit from having a third center back there, unless you just really want to clog the central channel in front of the box.
Yeah, I think if you conceded approaching 4 XG through 2 games, you might want to consider a different formation. Like, because that is not sustainable and you will not win games that way.
My primacy bias caveat that I laid out in week 1, I think still remains. The half-life on that caveat will decay a little bit more and a little bit more with each passing week, but it's still only week 2, and there is still a lot of time for stuff to bed in. I think even, as sticky and predictive a stat as XG is, it's not really that predictive after a couple of games. If we're seeing this kind of defensive performance from them in like 3 or 4 weeks, then that's a different conversation. But right now, like, I would cautiously give Montoya some latitude to try and fix it.
How does he want to play? Like, he wants to play possession. Do you think that Bay was really executing that?
Other than like holding onto the ball a little bit more than last week, no, not really.
Possession is always has to be modified by the question of where possession, when possession, why possession.
I saw this. I didn't actually fact check this. This was like in the match report from the NWSL. But teams with at least 60% possession in regular season play last year won 6 of the 19 games and scored 17 goals while conceding 19. So why do teams want to play possession soccer in the NWSL?
It's just always this idea of thinking that if you have the ball, somehow that means you're technically superior and therefore more likely to win. I think that's just something that's sort of ingrained in a lot of people's brains, regardless of whether it's Pep or if it's Cruyff or whoever, Renus Michels in the 70s. What matters is shooting from high quality chances, and you can do that in like a bunch of different ways. It's so funny. Like, I remember thinking about this last year. Every player, maybe not every player, but pretty close to every player who did like the little halftime interview in between gasping for air while trying to be on live television, what they would say is, we want to hold on to the ball more. We want to keep the ball. We want to work with the ball more frequently rather than just constantly being in transition. Coaches would say that in post-match pressers. Every coach coming into leagues, we really want to have a system where we can keep the ball and control the tempo of the game. But it works for Spain because those players have been drilled at La Masia since they were 10 years old on how to do this. And American players are not given that when they play for club teams when they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. So we have a bunch of players who are very transition happy. And this season is going to be interesting because so many coaches and so many players from Europe are coming into the league this year that maybe this is the moment where after some early kinks that need to get worked out, it will all come together and the NWSL won't be a transitional league anymore. But that is a long process for that to actually happen. I applaud it. I applaud Montoya or Jonathan Giraldez when he comes or Fran Alonso, whoever wants to try and do this. But the assumption that it is automatically going to make you win games more easily is silly. For me, Bev Yanez is the poster child of that this season so far because she's really stressing she wants her team to play a possession game. And there is nobody doing 4-4-2 suffer ball more right now than Racing Louisville. And we're seeing it from the Spirit. Like the Spirit wants to build through the thirds. That's why Hirschfeld was their main central outlet, because they want to turn her into Aitana Bonmati or some version or analog thereof.
Not only Spain, but I also think Serena Vigman's influence on England really speaks to the in vogueness of control. And of course, managers like control. They're control freaks. It takes a very specific kind of person to identify the talent that they have on hand and to be anti-philosophical about the way in which they play. And this is why we sort of talk about like lineup optimization a lot. It just doesn't feel like there's a version of Bay right now where control is optimizing for what you have on hand. I actually really like the back three because I think it opens up Didasco, who I thought had a really good game.
I agree.
Yesterday. Really underrated. I feel like they would be better suited by taking what they have in terms of potential wing outlets from a back three to create width for their midfield in attack and then just create balls to run onto, or bypass in a non-control system, bypass and just go to Bodie, who looks kind of like a revelation so far. Like, I think Tess Bodie's looked great. Hey, yes, Doc, that was you.
I called that one.
Would you like the floor for a second?
Yes, Tess Bodie looks great for Bay. I mean, North Carolina's lost. They don't know what the expansion rules were, and this is what they get because of that.
No, Tess Bodie looks like a revelation, and Kundananji, Oshwala, Bodie could be a three-headed monster. It's just a question of how one gets to the three of them, and a 3-4-3 or a 5-2-3 looks like potentially the best way to get the best talent on the field at the same time.
So who's the left wing back? Camberos? Is that who you use?
Yeah, Castellanos.
As a wing back, really?
Camberos is probably the better call. You can have a pinch in, particularly with a back three. I think their best lineup probably is asymmetrical. I just feel like if you're going to be without Loera, you need to figure out other ways to possess and attack, or maybe not possess so much, but attack. And maybe bypassing the midfield, attacking down the wings, and then just using your three-headed monster in attack.
The unalloyed positive that comes out of this game is that 11.7 thousand showed up at Audi Field, which is a home opener record for the Washington Spirit. And in fact, folding in Bay to this, because whatever attendance they have next week will be a home opener record, only 3 teams did not break their home opener attendance records this year. Anybody want to guess which 3?
Also, can we talk about Utah's attendance?
Or the fact that they didn't report it?
Yes, I was just going to say, I can't figure out what it was. I, asked the community.
It was light.
If last weekend was a sellout, yesterday they had 15,000 people.
Which 3 teams? Chicago broke their record, 5,800. Oh, I should qualify it. The 3 teams that didn't either match or beat. Because it's like Angel City actually can't break their record because they just sell out. They don't have any more bodies to put in the seats. Which 3?
We're not counting Gotham here because...
I mean, if you wanted to count the Challenge Cup, you could.
Did San Diego not break their record?
They broke it. They broke the all-time league record for a home opener because that stadium's so huge.
Louisville? That's a team we haven't said.
Yep, Louisville's 1. You got that.
It's got to be Seattle.
That's 2.
Orlando?
That's 3. Everybody else set home opener attendance records, which is, I think, very, very cool. Chicago was never going to get more than 5,800 people out to Bridgeview when it was 38 degrees Fahrenheit at kickoff. So the fact that they did break the home opener attendance record is pretty cool.
The flip side of this is if 11 teams matched or exceeded their all-time record, even if that was their first game ever and they lied about their attendance, the league's heading in a really good direction.
You know who else is heading in a really great direction? Expected Own Goals, which you should follow on all social channels at XOwnGoals. That's the letter X Own Goals. If you're listening to us, that probably means you're subscribed to the feed. But if not, go to the Expected Own Goals or the American Soccer Analysis feed. Follow, rate, review. Rate us 5 stars if you're going to rate us at all. If you think we have an own goal, please email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. You're sitting in stunned silence, Eric, as though you didn't know this was coming.
I liked that transition. I thought it was awesome.
That's right.
That's why I turned away from my mic.
Yeah.
Also, possibly as an own goal, Arianna, you go by Arianna, right? Or Arianna? Which
Arianna.
one? You go by Arianna. I definitely called you Arianna on the pod last week.
Don't worry about it. I didn't even notice.
I'm own goaling for myself. Evan's the pronunciation king.
Even I've been blowing it lately.
But I've never called him once Yvonne, though I think I might begin doing that.